I mean, what would you be willing to give up to absolutely guarantee your own safety and security? For Hobbes, this wasn't just some thought experiment. It was very real. And his answer? It was radical, it was stark, and it became the very foundation of modern political thought. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to dive into the chaotic world that shaped Hobbes. Then, we'll explore his diagnosis of humanity, what he called the state of nature. After that, we'll get to his solution, the social contract, which leads straight to the creation of the absolute sovereign. And finally, we'll wrap up with his enduring legacy and the key takeaways you'll want for your exams.
Okay, Section 1. A world of chaos. You see, you really can't understand Hobbes' obsession with order unless you first understand the profound disorder he lived through. His entire philosophy is a direct, gut-level reaction to the absolute horrors of the English Civil War.
Now look at this timeline. What's just staggering is the sheer speed of the collapse. In less than a decade, England goes from a stable kingdom to an all-out battlefield and then to a nation that publicly beheads its own monarch. Can you imagine the terror, the uncertainty? This wasn't just politics, it felt like the end of the world, and it's from exile, watching all this horror from a distance, that Hobbes writes his masterpiece, Leviathan. It's basically a desperate plea for order.
And that experience of total collapse leads us directly to Section 2, the state of nature. Hobbes asked a really fundamental question. What are human beings really like when you strip away all the laws, all the government, all the niceties of society? His answer is his diagnosis of the human condition.
So Hobbes argues that at our core, we're basically self-interested creatures. Our number one drive? Self-preservation. Our number one fear? Violent death. Simple as that. This leads to this constant, restless search for power. Not because we're necessarily evil, but because we need power to protect ourselves. And here's the real kicker. We're all more or less equal in our ability to kill one another. You know, the weakest person can kill the strongest through some sneaky plan or by ganging up with others. And that equality, when combined with a desire for the same limited stuff, makes conflict totally inevitable.
This slide just lays out the choice so perfectly. On the left, you've got the state of nature. Hobbes famously calls it a war of all against all. In that state, there's no industry, no art, no progress, just constant gnawing fear. And on the right, you have the Commonwealth. That's Hobbes' word for an organized state, which offers the alternative: peace, security, and the rule of law. That's the prize everyone's desperate to win.
And here it is. This is probably the most famous quote in all of political philosophy, and it's the ultimate summary of Hobbes' state of nature. For him, this wasn't just some poetic exaggeration. This was the logical, unavoidable consequence of what happens when human nature is left to its own devices. An absolutely intolerable condition that any rational person would do anything to escape.
So, if that's the diagnosis, what's secure? How do we get out? Well, this brings us right to Section 3, the social contract. Hobbes believed that even though we're driven by our passions, we're also creatures of reason. And that reason, it gives us the blueprint for our escape.
Now this is absolutely crucial, and it's a key point for your exams. The contract is not between the people and a ruler. No, it is a contract that every single individual makes with every other individual. They all basically agree at the exact same moment to say, okay, I give up my right to do whatever I want, but only if you give up yours too. Then they transfer all these surrendered rights to a third party, the sovereign, who is created by the contract but isn't actually a part of it.
This slide lays out that logical path just perfectly. It all starts with the fear of death. That's the motivator. That fear leads to a rational agreement to find a way to peace. To make that happen, people have to cede rights, specifically their right to do anything and everything. In doing so, they create a sovereign by handing over all their collective power. And the result, the end goal, is security, because now you have this powerful entity that can enforce the peace for everyone.
Which brings us to the result of that contract, and honestly, the most controversial part of Hobbes' whole theory. Section 4, the absolute sovereign. Hobbes calls this entity the Leviathan, or the mortal god, the one to whom we owe all our peace and defense.
So the powers of this sovereign have to be absolute and indivisible. Why? Well, because Hobbes looked at the English Civil War and saw it as a direct result of divided power between the king, the lords, the commons. To stop that chaos from ever happening again, all power, legislative, executive, judicial, military, all of it has to be in one place. The sovereign makes the laws, so the sovereign is, by definition, above the law.
So, does this mean the subject is just a slave? Not
Quite. And this is a really crucial distinction. The sovereign's authority is nearly limitless, but there are two huge conditions. First, you always keep the right to defend your own life. And second, and this is the big one, your duty to obey the sovereign only lasts as long as they can actually protect you. If they fail, the deal's off, the contract is void, and you're all right back in the state of nature. Legitimacy is based purely on performance.
And for Hobbes, while the sovereign could be a group of people, a monarchy just made the most sense. It was the most efficient, not because of some divine right of kings. He completely dismissed that idea, but for pure practical utility. In a monarch, the public's interest and the monarch's private interest are the same thing. A rich, powerful, and peaceful kingdom makes for a rich and powerful king. It just aligns everyone's self-interest perfectly.
So let's bring it all home in our final section, Hobbes's enduring legacy. Why is this theory, which is almost 400 years old, still a cornerstone of political science and a topic you have to know for your exams?
Okay, for your revision, this slide is everything. The problem? The chaotic state of nature. The solution? The social contract, which creates an absolute and indivisible sovereign. And the whole point, the core theme, is to protect the individual by providing security. Just remember that flow. It's a theory based on individualism where you trade your liberty to escape your fear.
And this leaves us with Hobbes's great, unsettling question. It's one that echoes in every single modern debate we have about state power, surveillance, and freedom. Must we always choose between security and liberty? Hobbes, scarred by war, gave his answer without a moment's hesitation. The ultimate price of peace was